No, I would just encourage Americans, if you're at a big woke company, you should do one of two things. Ideally, stand up at work and be brave for other people, because when you're brave, you give courage to other people. It's really amazing. It's fun to watch. I've seen it happen a lot.
Right? Well, Mr. Andrew Crapuchettes, did I say the name right?
You did. Nailed it.
Yes. It's like more syllables than I went to school for. So I really appreciate you taking time to join me on the RobatDesk podcast. And for people that don't know, you're the founder of Red Balloon. You have a real interesting background on starting that. And I don't know if you realize this, but we actually have quite a bit in common. So one thing I noticed is that one of your specialties is one of my specialties.
Which one? Eating or rollerblading?
I'm a phenomenal ping pong player.
Oh, yeah. No, I can go lefty, righty, whatever you want. I'll beat you.
That's impressive, but I'm 317-0 against my mother in ping pong.
I beat my kids all the time too, so it's amazing.
So
yeah, I do.
So my wife gives me this argument because with my nephew's now like approaching 16, and we've been playing ping pong against him since, he's 10 probably.
Right.
Is there an age where you go, or a time where you go, okay, I'm going to let you win?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay, good.
I don't think so. Although, so my 16-year-old son is now 6'1".
Okay.
And I'm not. And so I've beat him at basketball for many, many years. And, sometimes I'd let him get a little bit closer, build some self-confidence. You don't want to get him carried away, though. Let's be excited. So anyway, but there has become a moment where I'm not letting him win, but it is a complete beatdown, and I'm way out of my league.
Good. Yeah, no, I was just curious, because we played cornhole or whatever the game was, and she's like, how come you don't let him win? I'm like, because I want him to earn it. I want him to know, hey, when he beats you.
100%. And they know. I would know. Oh, you just let me win. That's not the same. I want to actually beat you with you putting full effort in. So,
yeah.
No, it's the right decision. You're right on.
Okay, good. I was just making sure. And the other thing, with a little bit of due diligence and researching a little bit, you were in the tech industry for a little bit, and then you moved to Idaho with 5 kids. So I know you must have done something right to be able to move to Idaho with 5 kids.
Yeah. Well, I had the kids here. I grew up in the Bay Area. I was actually born at Stanford Hospital.
Oh, wow.
My dad was a PhD student there, and did the Bay Area thing. Actually, long story boring, everyone thought I had learning disabilities. I was kicked out of kindergarten at a very early age. And so I ended up being homeschooled a long time ago in California, because I'm now 45 years old. Okay. And so 40 years ago, I was homeschooled because my mom's like, he gets jokes, and if he gets jokes, something's going on. So I don't believe that he has learning disabilities. So I'm wildly dyslexic and a variety of other things. Anyway, fast forward, I enter the tech industry at 16 years old, because if you can code in California, you can make a lot of money. And so all of my friends went off to college. At that point, I was driving a convertible Mustang and earning what I believe to be magical amounts of money, and in the tech industry. And so I never got around to the college thing. I feel like I went to the school of hard knocks, going through a .com whirlwind in the Bay Area, and just learned a ton.
Now, what was that like when the tech bubble bursted when you were out there?
Yeah,
that was what? When was the burst? Was that in the early 2000s?
Yeah, 2000, 2001. So basically, we were a successful software company a long time ago, and we were selling CAD, computer automated design. And then we wanted to, and again, at this point, I was not an executive. I was just a dude. Okay. But we got $32 million of venture capital money. Oh, wow. Because they wanted us to become a .com and be really, really cool. And it's amazing how fast you can blow through $32 million. So by the time I left at the ripe old age of 22, I was in charge of the West Coast and Asia for technical sales. And so I was traveling all over the world. I turned 21 with an expense account. Wow. I have phenomenal stories of karaoke bars under the streets of Tokyo, and some of those stories just need to stay there. So this is the life that and then I get to 22 and I'm burned out because I'm working 100 hours a week. Yeah. I'm worth more money than all my friends, but who cares, because I didn't have any friends. So that was easy to do. So move up to Idaho because there was a church up here, and a pastor had written some books, and I've read those books, and I thought, I'll move there. And at 22, you can move somewhere, and if you don't like it, you can move somewhere else.
Absolutely.
So, move up here. I find that you can buy a house for like $130,000, and coming from the Bay Area, it's like, well, I'll take 4.
That's like 1 month's rent in the Bay Area.
Correct. Exactly. So I buy myself a house, and then the .com goes out of business. And so I'm now in Moscow, Idaho, without a job and some money. But I'm like, okay, what should I do now? So I look around this town, and I think this is a cool town, and there's a lot of people. So University of Idaho's in town. Washington State University is right across the border. So you have 2 major universities, and then you have New St. Andrews College, which is a small Christian liberal arts college here in town. And if you graduate from those colleges and you don't then work at the university, you're going to have to leave. And I thought, well, it's a great town, but we need jobs. And I have been blessed with the ability to create jobs, so I should do that here. So I've started a whole variety of businesses.
Okay.
A 3D printing business that we ended up selling to Stryker, a student information software business that we did a management buyout with, and then a big economic data company that I grew to several hundred employees and sold it 4 times, which is probably another story in and of itself.
How do you sell the same thing 4 times over?
I'm like that guy, who's like, hey, you want to buy this bridge? And you just keep selling it. No.
Sorry.
It was like, actually, that's illegal.
I know guys that have done that in their relationships, but I don't know how you do that in business.
With companies, yeah, they look into the stuff. No, so what happened is you can sell a business. You don't have to sell all the business.
Okay.
So I sold to a private equity firm. They actually gave me a chunk of ownership back in exchange for performance of the business. Then we sold the business again to a large private company, and we were with them for 5 years. I ended up running a large division of their company. I got really tired of that, and so we found another owner for the company I was running. And every time I lose a little bit of ownership as we go along, and so you get checks and not ownership. And lo and behold, the end of that road is you don't have any ownership left, and then you have a board that can do whatever they want. And they decided I was a little too conservative and a little too Christian for their liking. And so even though our performance was off the chart, I was removed not for performance but for perception, because I wouldn't make a statement about George Floyd, and I wouldn't make a statement about BLM, and I wouldn't shut down the office for COVID. I said, look, our employees are adults now. If they want to come in and work, it's kind of their deal. And if they want to wear a mask, I fully support it. If they don't want to wear a mask, I also support that. And the board would not allow that kind of thing. So
they wouldn't allow people making independent decisions that are best for them.
Right. Yeah, that one. They don't like they don't like that. And so after, and we're talking about a company that's a software business growing 25% with a year with a 40% margin, producing enormous amounts of cash for them. But I just wasn't the right fit culturally for them. So lo and behold, what was that, about 10, 11 months ago? Yeah. I found myself delightfully unemployed, looking around like, okay, what do I want to do next?
It seems like you've been in that position a number of times.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of fun. And if you don't let it bother you too much, it's like, the world's your oyster. Go after it. So
right.
I'm doing a housing development in town. I got about 100 houses I'm working on, and then I'm restoring a couple old historic buildings in town.
Very cool.
And I'm on the board of a school and a national organization, and I've invested in a number of businesses that I'm on the board of. So I'm like, I probably have enough to just take a year off from having what we call a full-time job. But about 2 months into my retirement, doing all these things, friends like, hey, you should do a job board here in Moscow, Idaho, just so, local people can know where to find a job. I'm like, well, I like technology. It's fun. So sure, I'll write myself up a job board. I'll call it Red Balloon because, I like to name things. It's fun. If you've ever been on a hot air balloon, it's a little bit terrifying and a lot bit fun, kind of like looking for a new job. And the situation I've been in several times, it feels like a hot air balloon.
I haven't been in a hot air balloon, but I've heard the people describe it, and that seems like a fair comparison.
Yeah. No, so the best part is, we did a hot air balloon. I had 3 of my kids with me. We were in Dartmoor, England, so kind of in the moors of England. You could see the ocean. We go up in this thing. It's amazing in a hot air balloon. The terrifying part is landing. Really? Because there's no landing gear. And so the guy's like, okay, so how do you steer a hot air balloon? I didn't know this beforehand. He said, well, there's air going different directions at every level. And so what you do is you just find the level that's going the direction you like, and you hang out in that level. So you can kind of go up and down as needed. I'm like, well, that's kind of cool. Makes sense. But then when you land, he's like, okay, we got a big open grass spot here and we're going to land this. Here's what I need you to do. And I have 3 of my kids. The oldest is probably 10. And the youngest, 2 years apart. So I've got an 8 and a 6. And he's like, okay, what I need you to do is I need you to pin those 3 children as hard as you can against the side of the basket because you're their seatbelt, and hold on for dear life and don't let them fall out. And he tells me this like 10 seconds before we hit the ground. He's like, okay, here's your job. Go do that. I'm like, yes, sir. I'm on it. So I'm strapped in holding the children, and we bounce like a couple of times. The kids think it's the best thing that ever happened. And I'm actually having a great time, but terrified at the same time. And again, kind of like looking for a new job. Red balloon.
No, that's amazing. Like the hot air balloon experience, sitting on that for a moment, it's like, I talked to a guy out here who's developing electric aviation. So he's like, have you ever been in a single propped airplane before?
Yeah.
And so theirs is electric. So if you like in a typical combustion engine, it is loud sitting behind that because your feet are sitting on the engine when you're basically up in the plane.
Right.
He's like, but an electric one, it's eerily quiet. I guess. So
Oh,
like,
sure.
could you imagine being in, like a hot air balloon, but with a motor on it that's eerily quiet flying over the sky?
Yeah, well, that's it. The hot air balloon is like deadly quiet up there, right? Yeah. And it's perfectly still because you're going with the wind, so there is no breeze. You are the breeze. Oh, so wow. Anyway, it's really cool. It's really cool. No, it's a worthwhile thing to do.
No, that's crazy. So you got into Red Balloon, and that was about, you're celebrating just about the one, like you said, about the 1-year anniversary of the official
Red Balloons.
Launch.
Yeah, probably it's August 10th. So what is that? I'll call it 8-9 months. So
okay,
something in that range. So so we started this job board, and a job board's not a business I've ever really wanted to get into. I'm more of a technology guy, and it's a technology, but it's not super complicated.
Yep.
But our thesis was freedom, right? And so that's why the red, because people are moving to red states and they're looking for freedom. So Red Balloon, and then .work because .com was taken and it sounded like communist to me, right? .com, .communist, right? I think that's actually what it means. I don't know.
I thought it was that commercial. I thought that's what .com was.
It is commercial. Okay. It's not communist, but yeah, you're right.
I'm like, it's been a while.
Wait a minute. Oh, no.
That's one of those questions like on a quiz. If you ask me, I'm like, I'm pretty sure this is what it is. I haven't heard it in 20 years to make sure. Like, you could have convinced me otherwise. So yeah. So it means .communist. Believe it, all the way down. So anyway, so redballoon.work. That's it. So I create this job board, and for a month, and I create some videos. I'm like, hey, I have a job board. It's all about freedom. And for a month and a half, I kind of try not to do anything with it, even though I start getting notes from people around the country saying, hey, when's Red Balloon coming to Minneapolis or Atlanta? Because we need freedom too. And I'm like, it's not. It's a Moscow only job board, and I have a housing development, and thank you very much. Nice to meet you. So I do that for about a month and a half, and then my wife hits me upside the head and said, look, you're just being selfish, and you need to do this for other people. And about that time, Joe Biden comes out with his proclamation about the vaccine mandate, and everyone's panicked. And so it was like, well, okay, I guess if the president is your best sales rep for your company, you probably should just go ahead and lean in and do this thing. So that's what we did. And I had a couple of part-time people around me, and then Fox and Friends calls up and said, hey, can we talk about your non-woke job board? And this is going to be embarrassing. I'm going to say it out loud on your podcast. I've never said this before. I'm listening.
Fox and Friends calls up, and I'm like, who's Fox and Friends? Is that a kid's show? Like, Mr. Weasel, what are we going to do today? Anyway, and I call a friend. I'm like, who's Fox and Friends? They're like, it's kind of a big show. So anyway, I was on that show, and it wasn't a kid's show. I found out when I was there.
That would have been an interesting, like, it's like where you were like a really bright outfit. Like, oh, I thought this was like, I was going to go be with Bob the Builder or something.
I know. We're exactly. So yeah, no purple dinosaurs. It was actually pretty serious. But anyway, so we do that, and
that's pretty impressive that they heard about it and reached out to you too.
Yeah. Now, that's the thing is, unfortunately, in America, Red Balloon shouldn't be necessary, right?
No.
You shouldn't have to have a job board focused on freedom. They should all be focused on freedom. And it shouldn't be newsworthy, but it has been. So I've been blessed to do, I don't know, like 100 interviews over the last 8 months, just talking about freedom and talking about people and the stories I get. So I've run a lot of businesses, as I talked about. And in all of those businesses, I don't know that I probably got like 1 or 2 thank you notes from customers or from employees or whatever. I mean, I probably got more, but not a lot. Red Balloon, I get multiple thank you notes from perfect strangers every day. People saying, you know what, you have just given me a lifeline, because I now feel like if I live my values at work, if I stand up, that I know where I can go get a job where my freedom will be respected. Or one lady, I met this couple in Tennessee. They come up to me at a conference. They're like, "Hi, are you Andrew?" I'm like, "Yes, I am." And the lady starts talking. She's like, "So my husband here has had a job for the last 10 years with someone who just really hated his worldview and did not like the fact that he thought the way he did. So he's been wearing a mask at work. He's been really beaten down every day at work, which really wears on a person after a while." She said, he just went to Red Balloon. He just found a job with someone who happens to be a conservative Christian. And at this point, she gives me like this bear hug. She's like, "You've changed the trajectory of my family," because he comes home satisfied and deeply prosperous in his work. He's not even making more money necessarily, but he is doing good work and not getting beat down every day at work. Honestly, I get those notes every day. Like, man, the CRT training was catching up with me, and now I have the joy of a hard-working day again. And so, anyway, that's a side effect I hadn't anticipated, but it's been really cool.
No, it's cool. What do you see is like, what do you see like the next steps for Red Balloon? Like, is it in the sense like, is it in the culture changing where you sort of you have this, like you said, like the CRT type stuff, But it seems like even in the last few weeks, a lot more of the corporations, I think probably because the market's completely tanked. And we're going to post this today, so you can say stuff about today or, May 26. We're not, holding this in a can for a month. But the stock market's been tanking. It's been like the worst like stretch of days in the market since like 1928 or something. I thought I saw.
Yep.
And so companies immediately, I think, are now turning back, going, well, it's not profitable for us to act this way as much because you can only handle so many bad days.
Yeah. No, that's a true story.
Yeah.
Well, so there's a couple things I'd point out on this. So 40% of companies in America still have a vaccine mandate. And while they may have given exemptions, they still have that in place. I do see some of the woke stuff dialing back in some big notable businesses, but there are other businesses, and I'll pick on one in specific, Microsoft. And this is a story from just a couple of weeks ago. I was talking to a lady who's an executive there, and she says, "I had an American flag as my background for Teams." Like Zoom. I had an American flag, and I was told to take that down by my manager because it was white supremacy. It was a sign of white supremacy to have an American flag. And then a coworker had a picture of a black man being lynched with the subheading of "A good man died at your hands today," right? Straight out of the CRT playbook. And not only was that tolerated, that was celebrated. So this stuff is going to be out there for a while. Now, that being said, I would love a world where Red Balloon is absolutely not necessary and I can get back to all the other things I was doing, right? Like, perfect, good. I solved my problem. I've helped thousands and thousands of Americans find joy at work again. If I can accomplish that, I feel like I have done some good things. That being said, I think that there's some distinctly new ways to do labor exchange in America. Right now, labor exchange is pretty broken. You can go and post a job on a job board, and you can hope for the best. It's called posting and praying. And sometimes you get a response to that. If you're a job seeker, you apply to a job. You usually get crickets from that. And you know that there are 11.5 million jobs open in America today. And there are millions of people that are looking for work and haven't found them. So there's clearly something broken between these two players in the economy, the employers and the employees. And so we have some ideas on how to change the way that that's done that I think would be a real blessing, a deep blessing to job seekers, and really make them a hero and put them more in control of their career changes.
What's interesting with like the job boards and like the hiring process, like I have my wife's in HR and she's got family that's in HR. So I hear a lot of these behind the scenes stories of like the hiring process. And one of the things that amazed me that's happening more recent is because like you could post a job, whether it's on Red Balloon or other platforms out there, like the Indeeds of the world. Am I allowed to say Indeed? Like, is that like, I mean, but like.
No, yeah, you can say Indeed. I'll even say Indeed back.
Okay, I'm just like.
Right.
Not trying to start a fight here, but like but you could have hundreds of people that apply for the job.
Yep.
And so the issue then you have is then for the hiring managers, they're like, how do I go through these hundreds of resumes? So even now in some of the first phases of getting through is like they're using AI to read the resumes to check the boxes that they want, which is really I mean, I get why it's a simplified process, but I feel like on a practical sense, a lot of good people get left behind that way.
Oh, absolutely. You know, I talked to a hiring manager at Starbucks. Do you know how many resumes Starbucks, and this is for all their stores around the country, do you know how many resumes Starbucks gets every year?
Oh my gosh. If they just got like even 2 or 3 at each store every day, I don't know if that's reasonable, but like.
Yeah, they get between 6 and 8 million a year. Resumes.
Jeez.
And if you started reading those, you'd spend the rest of your life and you wouldn't make it, right?
Correct.
So they've got to figure out a better solution for that. I would love to have a more human solution, and I can't tell you the whole thing that Red Balloon's going to do. You're just going to have to pay attention because I told you I'd have to kill you, and that's really hard over video chat. So, right? So,
you seem like a resourceful person, so I'm not going to push that one.
Right, exactly.
You've helped a lot of people out. I'm not turning on the bad side of a lot of people.
Yeah, that's right. All right, people, go get Rob. No,
as you can tell, I'm in my basement. Good luck finding me.
Yeah, right. That's right. He's off the grid. Not totally. So part of it is we need to think about a better way to do that. Yeah. And part of it is there's so many people out there that still want to find good employees. So I've been talking to our employers on Red Balloon, and they said, look, you are a filtering process for us that we don't have to do on Indeed.com. And as a side note, I was told that C12 Group, which is the largest CEO group, Christian CEO group in America, was told that they can't post jobs on Indeed because they're a Christian organization. So they're just not allowed to participate there. So this is what Mark Sharrow told me about Indeed. So at Red Balloon, we are asking every employer to sign a pledge that they will respect the freedom of their employees. They will not have wokeness in the workplace, which includes, but is not limited to, requiring various medical procedures of your employees. We'll call it a vaccination, but also a lot of this other woke stuff. Like you're pledging to not do woke stuff, right? And then the employees are pledging to basically not be snowflakes in the HR department whining about every little thing, but actually be people who are going to just work hard. Unfortunately, and again, in America, this is a novel concept.
It is.
And so a lot of, right? And a lot of our employers are like, and one employer said, every time I hire an employee through Red Balloon, it's cleansing to my culture because I'm just getting hardworking, freedom-loving, patriotic people who don't want to be political activists in the workplace. They want to focus on bringing value to their employer. Another employer said, look, I might not get as many candidates from Red Balloon as Career Builder or Indeed or ZipRecruiter or one of those other folks out there. He said, but I know that the people that are coming through Red Balloon are going to be just hardworking Americans, and so I don't have to do the same filtering and awkward culture-based questions that I might have to do with other people. So I think there's going to be a need for this for a while we completely rethink the world, the way that labor exchange happens.
Yeah, no. So what do you think is the labor exchange? How it's going to change? Like, will Red Balloon be on this in the market of like the contract worker, like where it's what's the gig? The gig
economy. Fiber's a thing out there. Yeah. I would like to not just do a conservative version of something that's already been done. I want to think differently. The reality is that we know that the best employees I've ever hired, or you might not know that, but I know the best employees I ever hired were based on referrals, where they were based on someone that I trusted who said, you know what, this guy or this gal is extraordinary, and I worked with them for 2 years. That is worth way more than the fanciest resume on the planet and the coolest college degree, honestly.
Oh, yeah.
So there's your little clue into some plans that we have at Red Balloon. How do we think through, how do we use communities? When you think about it, if you're in a community like I am in Moscow, where it's a very blessed small community, you ask people like, hey, who should I hire? Hey, who should cut my hair? Obviously, it takes a lot of work.
Yeah, right. At least they don't charge by the pound.
Right, exactly.
I said that once to a barber, and they're like, "Don't worry, it's light." I'm like,
yeah, come on.
I'm like, work with me here.
No, unfortunately, I gave myself a haircut once with a beard trimmer trying to save some money, and it turns out my wife's like, "That's the worst haircut I've ever seen in my life," and so just take it all off. And then she's like, "I kind of like that." So here it is, the efficient economist haircut.
The low dry configuration. I bet you're a faster runner now because of that and many other things.
I think so. I'm like a seal. I'm like a seal in the water. I just zip right through it. It's amazing.
Go right through. So, what are your thoughts then on like in the corporate world? I forget what the initials are, but it's basically a social credit score.
Yeah,
going into
ESG.
Corporate ESG.
Yeah,
and like,
ESG.
And when you're talking about then like the community you're building for Red Balloon and referrals, there's a tight correlation. But like, there's a way. How do you refer people without giving them a score? Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah. Well, you know people that you've worked with before, right? And you know, like, hey, this person would be amazing at this job, and this person would be terrible at that job. And so I think that there's a world in which you use the network effect of people. We'll call it the anti-AI, where you actually have people making recommendations on who should work for places. Look, there's still a lot to work out. I will be totally honest, but there's a lot to work out. And the other thing we're seeing at Red Balloon is, so these employers are like, these are great employees. We're also seeing a lot of migration happening right now, where you have employees who are leaving places like California and New York. So our top two states for job seekers are California and New York.
Really?
And many of them are willing to relocate, right? So they're here because they're looking for freedom, and they want an employer that actually respects their freedom. And so, I think that's a trend we're also going to see. Is you're going to see what they're calling it the big sort, where you have 1 million people in a little over a year left California, Illinois, and New York combined, and they moved to places like Texas and Idaho and Florida and Arkansas and some of these conservative states. So I think you're seeing this country is starting, the demographics are starting to change based on freedom, which is, I think, really interesting. I mean, we all know that California's had a net out-migration because of taxes and regulation and all that for a long time. But when you start layering in all of these social justice things or social justice scores and ESG stuff, people are just sick of it. And I think conservatives, we're seeing this with Netflix and Disney. Conservatives are flexing their muscle a little bit, and they're going and finding a place. They're picking up their roots and headed to red state.
No, it's interesting, especially with, if you want to just broad brush conservative versus liberals, more conservatives put their money behind their beliefs.
That's right.
Where liberals will say things, but that doesn't help a company if it's not helping the bottom line. My best example, I was joking with someone the other day, is back in the day when Rush Limbaugh made a comment about like Tropicana orange juice, and then you couldn't find it on the shelves anywhere. It's like,
right.
It's a real thing. Like, they spend their money where they, think there's bigger value.
Yeah, well, there is a new. I have a month ago, I launched a podcast because I wanted to be like one of the cool people, like Rob.
And get in line.
Yeah, seriously. But no, I was having these conversations with our employers anyway. I'm like, fine, I'll make it a podcast, which actually takes more work than that. But there it is. So the one that we launched this week was Robert Netzley, a conversation with him. He started Inspire Investing, and basically he was the head of investment banking for Wells Fargo in Carmel, California, working with very wealthy individuals, and woke up one day and realized, I'm investing in companies that make abortion drugs. And so I make a return on my investment every time a mother kills her baby, and I just can't do it anymore. And so he went ahead and quit his job with only 2 months of salary in the bank and a mortgage and a wife who was pregnant. And it was like, all right, we're going to do this thing. So he went and started Inspire Investing, moved up to Boise, Idaho, and he now has over $2 billion under management, and he's calling it biblically responsible investing. And I think, to your point, a lot of conservatives are like, you know what, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is and where my beliefs are. And I think he's yet another example of, if you want to invest with companies who don't hate your worldview, which is probably a good idea, you can go and find out which companies they are at Inspire Investing. So, and they're a good Red Balloon partner.
Absolutely. No, I got a couple questions. We could talk about this stuff, especially in the job market, for a long time, but I want to respect your time here. And you mentioned one other thing I want to just quickly touch base on. You've developed like a housing community for, like you said, around 100 houses.
Yep.
So in the market today, with everybody moving, I'm sure it was a great timing for you when you started it. But like, what do you see with like the mortgage rates going up? Is the housing market? What are your, 10,000 foot view on the housing market?
Yeah. So here's what's going to happen. When the Fed raises interest rate, it makes money a little bit harder to get, and therefore people spend less, and so it cools down the economy. So far, so good. That's what they're trying to do. The problem is when the Fed not only raises interest rates a little bit, and it's been close to zero, but then also announces it's going to raise it a lot more, it actually changes behavior. And so I talked to a banker in New York recently, and he said loans are off the hook right now. Basically, everybody's getting home loans or any sort of debt they can get because they feel like even if it's gone from 3.5% to 4.25%, that's way better than 7%, which is what people are going to worry to get to. And so, unfortunately, getting debt is actually how inflation happens, right? Because it actually increases the money supply every time you borrow money. And so that is actually the issue. So I actually think inflation is going to continue to go the way of all flesh, and it's going to be bad. But I also think the economy is continuing to slow down because, the latest number I saw was in 2020, government spending was 44% of the GDP. And the government doesn't actually make anything. They just spend money. And so when you have an economy that is so dominated by government spending and you have debt that's been pretty cheap and is still really cheap, just a little bit more expensive, I think you're going to have stagnation. That's my guess. So what does that mean for a place like my little housing development with 100 houses? Well, I'll tell you what my bet is, and call me in a year and I'll tell you if I was right. We are seeing the de-urbanization of America happening right now. You have a lot of people moving out of these large cities, places like New York, Chicago, Seattle, Portland, because they're less safe than they used to be. A lot of those people aren't moving far. They're just going out into the suburbs. They're kind of going in these concentric rings. But there are, I'll say, throw-off families who, as you go out those concentric rings, they go a long way away. And you see places like Moscow, Idaho exploding because they are eager to see a small community where they can be safe. I was talking to a guy who just moved here from California. He's like, my daughter's out at 11 o'clock at night walking downtown, and I'm not worried at all, right? Because you're in a small town America. Well, I think the de-urbanization of America means that real estate in a place like Moscow, Idaho is going to continue to be a good bet. Even if it has a little bit of a dip, it's going to win in the long run. And so that's my take. We'll see how it goes. I will tell you, of the 101 lots that are going to be done in October, I have pre-sold 90 of them. Wow. So that should tell you something.
My wife and I moved into a new development back at the end of last year, and you could just see with the interest rates, and they're still even building the houses right behind us here. And so our whole big question was with interest rates jumping as much as they had, because we got in under 3%. And, and I just got married about 2 years ago. So we sold both our houses and got one.
Congratulations. Thank
you. And so that's, that kind of helped us out in the move, especially in the Denver area.
Well, and at that interest rate, with inflation as it is, it's basically free money. So even if you're getting up to 4 or 5%, it's not going to completely crush housing. It's gonna make it a little bit harder for some people. But with interest rate right now, it's still going to be a safe bet. So I actually think inflation, when the next number comes out, it will be up, and the administration is going to do its best to downplay that. But I actually think we're going to have higher than the 8.3%. I think it's going to be bad.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because isn't it like to kind of fix inflation, the interest rates have to match the. So
that's what Volcker. Yeah, that's what Volcker basically said. Look, if you want to beat inflation, you have to get interest rates to the level of inflation. And if imagine 8% interest, that is, and remember, that's the Fed rate. That's not what the consumers actually get from the bank. You're going to go to the bank and get 10 or 12% interest. That's when the economy comes to a grinding halt. So I don't think we're going to get there, especially not before November, because I think there's too many powerful people who don't want the economy to completely crash before then. But it's an interesting time, and the reality is, so price increases are not inflation necessarily, And this is me putting on my economic nerd hat. Okay. But when you borrow money, that's what actually increases the monetary supply and therefore creates inflation. But prices are based on inflation and supply and demand. And so you could completely change the money supply, make it harder to get money. But if you completely destroy the supply chain, you also are not going to be able to suppress prices. Because if there's only, 9 widgets out there, and there's 100 people that want widgets, it doesn't matter what you do to the money supply, the price is going to go through the roof. Right? Oh, yeah. And the reality is, when we destroy our ability to create our own energy or food or any of these other things, and we have to import this from other places, and we make it very difficult to do that, you're messing with the supply chain in addition to messing with the monetary supply. And so that's part of the reason I see stagflation coming down the pipe.
No, interesting to think about, Andrew. Interesting. All right, before I let you go, any last things? Did we miss anything? We've been talking here a little bit. Anything you want to touch on before I let you go? And I want to make sure you have an opportunity to tell where people can follow up with you too.
Yeah. I would just encourage Americans, if you're at a big woke company, you should do one of two things. Ideally, stand up at work and be brave for other people, because when you're brave, you give courage to other people, and it's really amazing. It's fun to watch. I've seen it happen a lot. So be brave, take a deep breath. It's going to be just fine. Now, you should do that, or you should leave, but you shouldn't do nothing. And I think that's the problem, is conservatives were the largest ideological group in America, but we're the least likely to say anything. And I think it's time to, I'm calling it hashtag coming out conservative in June.
Right.
Yep. So that's my encouragement, is do something brave for other people. Be courageous. It's the right thing to do. And if it costs you your job, come on over to redballoon.work. We'll get you another job with a conservative or just a freedom-loving company, right? It's not always conservative, but it's always freedom-loving. They'll always respect your ability to have your own opinions. Where to find out about all of this fancy information, redballoon.work is a good place to start. If you go on all the various social media things, it's at redballoonwork. On Twitter and various other things. I got on Twitter literally 2 weeks ago because of Elon Musk. And so if you want to follow me on Twitter with the other 4 people, it's
I'll be number 5.
Yeah, at a Crapuchettes. And sometimes I say extravagant things, so be careful.
All right.
And then, you got a little podcast going. The Courageous Economy is what I'm calling it. And just stories of people being courageous. It's pretty fun.
Very cool. No, excited. I've watched a few of them with some of the business owners you work with. They're pretty interesting. I don't want to ruin it for anyone else, and we're on a time crunch here as we wrap it up. But Andrew, I appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Rob. Have a great day.
Hey, thanks. You too.